Welcome to the Giving Nook, where nonprofit leaders, fundraisers, foundations, and philanthropists come to talk all things giving and impact. I'm Courtney, founder of The Philanthropy Place, a nonprofit consulting firm and your go-to fractional fundraising partner. I've spent my career in the nonprofit space helping organizations raise more, stress less, and build fundraising strategies that actually work. And now, I'm giving those insights straight to you. Whether you're in the fundraising trenches, leading a nonprofit, or just curious about how to give more intentionally, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Edgar, welcome to the Giving Nook. Sorry, that was a little interesting. Edgar, welcome to the Giving Nook. Let's start with your journey and your background. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I should tell our listeners that you are Edgar Palacios. You are the founder and leader, executive director, CEO, all the hats of two incredible organizations in Kansas City, Latinx Education Collaborative and Revolución Educativa.
Yes.
We'll shorten them as we go through this. But so excited to dive in today and talk about your background, everything you want to share about the organizations, fundraising, and just talk shop.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I appreciate the invitation to be here, Courtney. It's interesting. Like when I hear you talk about, I'm the founder and the CEO and the executive director of these organizations. I think it's important for me to say that I never saw myself doing this in so many different ways, and particularly, it was, I think, something that I've continued to explore since the day that I had an idea around how do we increase representation of Latinos in K-12, but more importantly, across the educational landscape. What does that actually mean? I just remember back in the day, it was like, I'm just going to meet every Latino educator. I'm going to get their email information. I'm going to put them in a spreadsheet and boom, now we have a network of people. And it was that simple, but clearly I was naive. And clearly I had an idea, but I hadn't done the work in a lot of ways to understand what that idea really meant and what the solutions really meant. And so it's been an interesting evolution for us as organizations to think about what does it actually mean to increase and support Latino educators, but also who are the other audiences that we need to be talking to in order for us to actually do what we intend to do, which is to create the necessary conditions for the advancement of Latino youth across the board. And so it has been an idea since 2016. We officially got the C3 and C4 status in 2018. And then we made it through the global pandemic.
Yes.
We are in the middle of another interesting scenario in the world. And so, it's been wild. And I think it's important to say that, Latino representation still matters.
It does.
It is important to say that our young people are still worthy of quality education. They're still worthy of being seeing themselves in the adults that make decisions on their behalf, and seeing themselves in the people who are educating them, and seeing themselves in leadership and whatnot. And so the work continues, the mission continues, and it's just been an interesting journey. So I and being a founder, I think, is also wild. It is a wild experience because you not only do the work and figure out the mission, but then you also have to hire yourself, and then you put together the board. And so you're building a nonprofit from the ground up.
Sure. And
that's just a weird experience overall.
Yeah.
Right. And then you got to do it while asking people to believe in the idea.
You with money and
right.
Their time, talent, treasure,
right.
all of it.
All of it, all at the same time too. It has just been an interesting journey. So every time I get the opportunity to reflect and look back on it, I'm always just, on one hand, amazed of everything.
You should feel really proud of what you've created here in Kansas City. It's amazing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, I also feel like we haven't done as much as we could do. Yeah. And there's so much more work to do. And so I I live in that kind of in between space of like, yay, and like,
yeah.
How do we continue to grow our impact and deepen our impact? And
it's crazy that you're about to come up on 10 years of the idea. You said IDEA was born in 2016,
yes.
and here we are in 2025.
Yes.
What are some of the challenges, that come to mind, some of the biggest challenges that you faced in the ideation phase, and then also the early days of both Latinx, which came first,
yes.
and then RevED came after that. So I'd be curious as you reflect back, like any kind of nuggets of information for anyone that's listening that's like, I'm in the thick of it, in the ideation phase or the startup phase, challenges.
I think there's so many, right? Because first and foremost, like what the people see, what the public sees, right, is very different than what's happening internally in a lot of ways, right?
Okay.
Not only are you trying to deliver on the mission and do the program work, but you're also internally trying to figure out, one, how do you fundraise for it? Two, like how do you build your financial statements in a way that people want to invest in them? Three, like who's your board? How are you navigating your board? How are you managing the board, those relationships, right? Like four, are all your ducks in a row? Is that right?
Yes.
Are all your eggs and ducks in a row?
Yes.
Are the eggs and the ducks, all of it? Are like every single one of them? Are they ready to go?
Yeah. Because they're under a microscope with foundations, with funders, with your
are.
board, with donors, with just like the city, all the people, all of those stakeholders are constantly looking at all those pieces.
And I'm always, it's still surprising to see, like, to know that, right? Like, it's not that I'm uncomfortable with like the microscope, but it is always interesting to like know who's looking.
Yes.
And to be like, wait a second, like, why are you looking? Like, I expect these people to look, but like you're looking, and that's interesting. And so it's all of that. Yeah. I've learned so many lessons just from even just the structure of an organization, right?
Yeah.
One, when we got our first grant, it was through a fiscal sponsor. And so I need to shout out El Centro,
yes.
And particularly Irene Caudillo, who said yes, right? Organizations don't have to fiscal sponsor anything.
Yes.
Right? They don't have to like put their work and take on the risk of a new idea or program. And so the fact that Irene and El Centro and her board said yes, like was a life-changing moment for the work. But one thing that I didn't know back then was like we got our first grant. I was so excited. Like we did the programs, we hit our metrics. And then we got our 501c3 status. And I was like, this is great. Like, awesome. Now I can go and directly ask for the funds. And of course, like we've met our funds and we've met our metrics. And so like, they're not going to be as hesitant to give money to us.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait.
Jokes.
You're a brand new nonprofit organization and we don't know you. I mean, we know your work, but like we don't know you anymore. And so then you got to start from zero, right?
And how long was that into that process? I'm curious, like months, years?
I would say it feels like months. It was probably years.
Okay.
Because everything also moves so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so let's say I think I called Irene sometime. I had an idea in like towards the end of 2016.
Okay.
I probably called Irene sometime in 2017. We probably received our first grant sometime at the end of 2018.
Wow.
Maybe
Yeah.
That's not true. It was at early 2018 because we got their C3 status at the end of 2018. And then we had to essentially start over. Right. And so by 2019, we received another grant. It was small, but it was the first grant to the organization. And then you learn so much about foundations, right? You learn things that you should have known, but you didn't know. Like, funders are not going to give, or philanthropy may not give more than a third of like the overall budget because there's a tipping point. Like there's all these other like hoops so how do you actually like do it?
Yes.
I still don't know.
Okay.
I think that they're like I've shown up every day to figure out how this works. I've shown up every day to figure out how to like meet the mission and how to navigate the political environment, the social environment, all of it. And I think that persistence is key. I think being naive in certain ways is key because it allows you to like ask certain questions, make mistakes.
Sure.
Which I think also help build the structure of an organization, because you start learning and you start like, oh wait, I shouldn't have done that, or wait, my attorney said that this was the way to do it. So there's just so much there. I'm rambling now, but
no, it
is not easy.
That's those challenges. Yeah. I remember, we met in 2020.
Yes.
It was in the thick of it because COVID and everything else. But now truly knowing your journey and where you were at that time with LEC and Latinx Education Collaborative, there was so much good that had already happened. You had impressed certain funders who were definitely keeping the organization afloat and that were very invested in your success, I feel like, looking back on that.
Yes.
But I'd be curious to know, like, now here we are 5 years later, somehow time is crazy these days. But looking at that, there's been huge success stories that have come out of that. And there's been so much success with LEC that you have now spun off and also have this, RevED. What are some of those success stories? Like, what are the things that you think happened both impact-wise in the programmatic side and fundraising side that made you say, okay, we can keep going. Like, we have momentum here.
In a moment of like vulnerability, like I think it's easy for me to talk about, we've built a network of over 2,000 Latino educators, and we've hosted like successful conferences where we have, 100 plus Latino educators in the same space.
So impressive.
Like we've placed Latino educators in classrooms, across the city. We launched Futuros, our program to increase the number of Latino educators in Kansas City. Like, one of our team members launched a digital literacy effort that like now has served over 250 people and families, right, in Spanish, like, and getting them connected to the internet and how to use a computer and whatnot, which seems tangential, except for the fact that like the goal behind the program is not just to give or not to build the capacity of digital literacy, but also to connect families to schools, because that's another way of increasing representation, right? So I feel like I should say all that and tout all that greatness, and that we launched, an affiliated 501c4 called Revolución Educativa to build power and lean into like the political side of this work, and to like form opinions and work on policies and all these issues. Like, I think that's what a normal executive director would say. I think for me, like, I'm learning that like success is in the eye of the beholder. Right. And so it feels also disingenuous to say that like there are not people out there who would look at our work and be like, oh, you haven't done enough, or you don't understand the challenges, or you're not doing what you need to be doing. And, I take that feedback seriously. One, because like we're in community, right? And like we're an organization, we have a vision for what's possible, but we also exist within the confines of community. And so when you have members of the community who may not see the value in it, or may not appreciate the value, or may not say that the work is where it needs to be, like that is also part of the work, right? How do you receive that feedback? How do you instill it? How do you implement it? How do you discern whether it's good feedback or not, right? So there's that. You have that audience. You have the funders who are like, let's say you meet the metrics, right? Meeting metrics is very different than actually having impact. And that's something that
so
like, I'm learning, right? Just because we can do these things doesn't mean that we're actually creating the impact that we want. And so how do you deepen your understanding of data and impact, and how do you track it and all these things, right? Fifth funders, then you have the political folks, like, 501c3s, like we are very limited on what we can say or do.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that we can't maximize our ability to lobby or to engage in those ways, but like there are limitations to that. And so, that's also a part of it. Who else? Like your team, you start building a team of folks, and like your team brings new ideas and new vibrancy to the work. And also, everybody has to go through the process of learning what the mission is and what it's about. And so what I thought was like a very simple and step-by-step process.
Yeah.
I think it's really fascinating to see, like, as an organization grows or as you build capacity, that a lot of the time it's also about reinstilling the values and reconnecting to like the basics of what you're trying to accomplish, right? And like continuing to do that. So you're grounding yourself in something, you're growing in other ways, and like you're trying to do it all at the same time, while like like
everything. I mean, everything is happening around you in the sense of your funders are looking at you, your donors are looking at you, those you serve are looking at you. And I think it's powerful what you said, that even when you look at the impact and your impact reports, your annual reports that you've pushed out the last 5 years, especially, the growth is unreal. The impact is there. The numbers are there. You just spoke to them. It's true change that's happening, at least in our Kansas City metro, right? Our local area. But I know that we even talked about this model being scalable, right? And like, what does this look like if this goes well here? Is this a replicable, scalable model? Because the problem doesn't just exist in Kansas City.
No, this is a national problem, right? And first and foremost, the initial, I'm going to steal language from MCEL, which is another nonprofit, they're Men of Color and Educational Leadership. And they talk about their work from a provocation perspective. They say their provocation is what happens if there are no male educators of color in 2030, or there's going to be none of that by 2030. Like, what does that world look like, right? So they provoke and they think about that. I think for me, the way that we've positioned our work is, listen, Latino students are the fastest growing student population in the country, right? We see that here locally. You see that nationally. Like, you can't get away from the fact that Latino students are going to be the ones that are driving enrollment across the board. But in places like Kansas City, Latino educators make up only 2% of the total the educator population, right? That number grows to roughly 8 or 9%, depending on where you read the data, nationally. The reality is the Latino community is a growing community as well. And so it's not like we're not taking up space or like we're a small portion of the population. Like we will be the majority minority in the next few years, if not already, right, in some ways. And so you start building from that capacity, right? So this is an issue across the board. COVID was a really special time for many reasons, but also because, we did all of our programming virtually, and because we were able to offer a link, we were able to meet educators from across the Midwest, particularly, who didn't have access to a community like ours, who wanted to be part of a community like ours and wanted to contribute and learn and engage and do these things. And so I think my vision at that point was like, oh, we have so many people out there that we can engage with. And then capacity is a real thing. Like, how do you do that well? How do you balance those needs? And then, I live in Kansas City, which means like local impact gets prioritized, right? So I didn't understand that when, I wrote out like the mission and statement in whenever it was, like 2017. Didn't understand any of it. I've been a nonprofit for 20 years. Like, for me, like, it's easy to go and shake people's hands and like ask them for money. Like, other than that,
you're like, but scaling an organization in 10 years to actually be existing in like 25 states. No, I'm just kidding.
But I think the cool thing about that too is that I think I've made an assumption over time that people will know what they're doing. And what I have found is that more people in this space actually have more questions than they have answers. And so understanding that, everybody's learning something, everybody's questioning like if they're doing their work right or correctly, or if they're like leading teams properly or not, or like where can they improve. That also, like, there was a level of perfection that I thought like I needed to hit in order for me to feel good about the work. And I'm slowly releasing that expectation and then recognizing that organizations are living things. And they're growing and they're just moving, right? Like they're just like they're amoebas. And like you got to get comfortable with the fact that like not everything is going to be right at every moment, and there are going to be things that are going to be working really well and growing and sustaining. There are going to be things that are not, and how do you navigate through that and hold true to the mission, but like also continue to talk about why the vision is so important.
And you just said something that sparked my next question as we kind of shift into fundraising and talking about the successes, the challenges, all the things. Sustainable fundraising is a really hard thing to do. I mean, true sustainable fundraising, right? Not like, oh, thank goodness we have this grant for 3 months, 6 months, or we got this one big gift, but being able to know where the path is forward and see, okay, this aligns with our strategic plan, this aligns with growth, this aligns with expansion. What has been some of the challenges, but also what are some of the wins? I love to talk about wins when you're like, I would have never thought in 2020 or 2018 that we would be where we are here because there was this fundraising win or there's this sustainability that was put in place by this grant or this person.
That triggers so many ideas and feelings in me. First and foremost, I will just like plainly say that I think that sustainable funding is a myth. I know that it is a question that people love to ask and talk about and plan around and all these other things, but I think that like
debunk it. I love it.
like sustainability, I think, is actually a tool to prevent others from being successful. Like it's a barrier that is placed on organizations.
Interesting.
That like keeps certain organizations out. Right. That's
like from an equity lens.
Absolutely. From an equity lens, but just also from like an idea lens. Right. I think, there are some barriers because when we start like businesses, when we start, for-profit businesses, and I'm sure like there are different questions when you ask for a loan and like, how do you plan to do this and whatnot? But the reality is like, you're selling an idea. Yeah. Right. Like, how are you going to bring in $1 million next year? Well, I'm going to do the same thing that I've done last year. I'm going to ask more people for more money, and then like hopefully they give me to it. And like I'll adjust the numbers as necessary. Right.
That is such a fair statement. Yes.
And so for me to like, I think
to say there's this like 100% clear pathway plan of like this, do this XYZ and it equals success. And that is sustainable fundraising.
I also will note on the other side of that as a grantee, like I've seen a lot of funders and they've had to shift their missions or not missions, but their strategic plans. They've had to shift the way they think about their work. They've had to like navigate through, organizational changes and employee shifts and all these other things. And so for me, like when you come into organizations, small organizations like ours and ask us these like really deep questions, I have learned to now ask those questions back. Yeah. Like, are you going to be my program officer in a year? Are you going like, if we're going to build a relationship here, like are people in your organization aware of our work? Like who else do I need to talk to? Because the chance that you may not be here in like 5 months is real. Yeah. And right. So
I'm just going to pause real quick because I've never heard anyone say, and I leave it to you, Edgar, to say this, which is what I love about you. The partnership aspect is real. To expect that someone who is giving you money, whether it's a major gift funder, a foundation, corporation, whoever it is, to expect that that's always top down and you should just get what you get and don't throw a fit or not ask questions or, whatever that looks like. You're literally saying, no, this is an actual relationship. This is 50-50. Like I'm going to give you what you need, but you need to give me what I need in order for this to be successful. Right.
Yeah. In a lot of ways. Right. And I think I've made some assumptions like in the way that I do my work. Right. I don't feel like our organization is entitled to anybody's money. So I don't approach a conversation with like, oh, these dollars are for the people and this is how, these need to be allocated to us. That is definitely not my style nor my belief. But when you start asking me questions about how the organizations run, how we think about sustainability, how do we think about, our strategic plan, like what is our plan to overcome some of these issues and Sure. I feel like now we're in a place where like I can ask you those same questions. Yeah. Right. And as a grantee or as somebody who receives funding, it's also, I think, fair because if your funder isn't as stable as it could be, it also creates instability in the work that we do. Right. And so I need to also be thoughtful about who do we align with? How do we align those dollars? And are they committed to this on a long-term perspective or are they committed to this on a short-term, like we're going to give you, some pilot dollars to do this work. Right. Yeah. So I think those are fair questions to have. Yes. In the spirit of like, how do you deepen relationships? I try not to go in and like be like, oh, you owe me money, like you owe our people money. I may believe some of those things.
Yeah, of course you do. Oh, you wouldn't have created this without it. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's one part of it. I think the meaningful moments for me and the things that I have to continue to circle back to are those unexpected investments. And I think in the beginning, like all investments are unexpected. So let me be very clear about that. Like
be specific because everything in nonprofit is expensive when people get in it and they don't realize it, do they? They're like, oh, I didn't know I had to budget for that.
Sorry, investments, not expenses.
Oh, sorry, investments.
Yes.
Okay.
I may have.
Okay.
Not
No.
said that
You said
clearly.
you said investments, and I heard expenses.
But that too.
So that's interesting.
Let's talk about that too, because I'm there too.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
I think initially, like one of our big funders, and I'll give them a shout out, was New Schools Venture Fund.
Yes.
They were our first 6-figure grant that we received. And I will say this because like I absolutely believe that like the way that they operated at that time and maybe still do, was fundamental and foundational in the way that I think about this work, right?
Absolutely.
I have had to apply for grants where, the amount may be $20,000, but I have to like give every piece of paper. I have to be like vetted through multiple committees and have multiple conversations around like our impact and all these things, right?
Right.
And it's $20,000. Right. New Schools wrote me a check for $150,000 after like one introductory meeting. Like I submitted like a page and a half of an application, and I had an hour-long interview with their team, and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna go ahead and like support you because we believe in your idea, and like we're gonna learn together."
Sure.
They called me on a Tuesday, said congratulations on your grant. Right.
So that's so incredible that you're saying like there is, for all the funders out there who are saying this may not be the case or like we can't do this, you have to go through this paperwork. You're saying like I've seen a model where it worked and it was crucial to the success of our essential like platform, of the launch of everything that you were doing in 2020, that they made it accessible and easy for you to do that work, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now they have a higher risk tolerance, and so I appreciate that, and not everybody has that same level of risk tolerance, but if you're interested in supporting new ideas and ideas that are proximate to the communities that we serve and that are proximate to the solutions that are proximate to those issues, then I also think you're going to have to figure out as philanthropy how to take on those additional risks.
Sure.
Or to say like, hey, like we're going to invest in you, but we're also going to put our arms around you as an organization to say like, we know that this may be a lot of money for you now, but how do we prepare you for that next grant? How do we prepare you for that next investment, right? And I think New Schools was really, really powerful with that. And then I've actually had my fair share of experiences here in Kansas City where you have funders and people who are thinking about money in this way.
Yes.
And so it is cool to see organizations push into trust-based philanthropy.
We love trust-based philanthropy. We can talk about it for days. I know you're like a huge proponent of it. Yeah. And I feel like every time I'm in a room and I bring it up and some people are like, what is that? I'm like, oh, this is the problem, is that we're still not educated as a sector as to the importance of it. And also being in a room with foundations, when that's brought up, they're like, see you later.
Which I can appreciate. But, I think this is where it's important to say like, like trust is a currency, right? And you build trust. You can lose trust, build trust. You can like maintain a level of sustainable trust.
Sustainable trust, but not sustainable fundraising. Right. We love that.
So and I also have like opinions on that too, because I think that it is important for there to be like a standard level of like entry.
Yes.
Because, if I've had to learn the lessons the hard way, right? So if you don't have your financial statements ready in order, like you're not going to be able to access certain types of funding.
Sure.
If you don't have your 990s filed, like you're not going to be able to access certain things. So those are things that people are not actively teaching you in the nonprofit startup community, right? So I think that there's like some levels where like, hey, not only do we give you the money to do the work, but let's figure out how to support the capacity of an organization to build and to position them to like actually receive more dollars in the future, assuming they're also meeting their mission or close to meeting whatever it is.
Whatever it is. And I'm curious, as we sort of like have run the gamut, talked about a lot of things. Do you have some key takeaways, key insights, some quick learnings that you want to just quickly wrap up, sharing any tidbits? I know you have a lot of experience, like you said, 20 years in the sector. So,
it is okay for a mission or an organization to evolve, right? I think that when you start as a young organization, you have a very like concrete idea about what is possible, but then you start learning more and more and more, and then you start adapting the solution to meet that like greater knowledge. And I think that it's interesting when we talk about mission creep, because sometimes like it's actually just evolution.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, eye of the beholder. So I always encourage other nonprofit leaders to think about how their missions are evolving based on the context of the work that we're in and where we're at, and based on the solutions that they know, right? Like, we're learning from others and we're trying to implement those solutions so we have a more effective and more impactful a way to do the work.
Yeah. And there's no better way to leave the audience with a profound statement. Of course you would. Of course you would. But I just want to say thank you, Edgar. Thank you for sharing your thoughts today. Thank you for diving deeper. Thank you for sharing insight and feedback and suggestions. I know I learned a lot from you. So I just want to say thank you for your time and for being here.
Well, I appreciate that. I also learned a lot from you, and I really appreciate your support throughout the years as we've grown the organization. And it's the joy that you bring to fundraising and the way that you think about the work and the way that you're willing to try new things. I think that that's been really awesome to see. And so excited to be here with you and be a part of this.
Thanks.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Giving Nook. I hope today's conversation gave you something, whether it's a fresh idea, a new perspective, or just a little more confidence in your fundraising journey. If you're loving what we're giving, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you're feeling generous, a quick review helps more people like you find us. Want to keep the conversation going? Connect with me on LinkedIn or visit thephilanthropyplace.com, where I share fresh fundraising insights every other week. Here's to fundraising that feels good, works smarter, and changes lives. See you next time in the Giving Nook.